from a Chili's maybe or something in
Oh, wow.
or at TGI, some place in it was Tampa or outside Tampa. So,
Uh,
but it was good because we knew it was beef, so that meant nobody else had it because nobody else is eating beef. So
Probably like a,
so that's pretty safe. So I'm glad we started on that E. coli beef strain. I think that's how we wanted to start this.
Michael, you need a cushion under your seat.
Well, how about if I lower my screen?
Yeah, we want to see more of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right, there
Yeah.
you go.
okay, some people might like it the other way, but.
I
okay.
think your forehead is definitely your nicest quality. I think
Okay, Thank you,
yeah, that's
I
really
work on
exciting.
it.
And we'll start in a few minutes. Looking forward again to seeing what everybody has come up with for the women they want to talk about. So, if you go on the list, there's just so many. There's so many ways to look at it. And last week we had some really interesting ones, including several that I think were either unknown or barely known by many of us. So that was really interesting. Hey, Judy, good morning. We're going to wait about 2 or 3 more minutes. So everybody on YouTube, we're going to wait 2 or 3 more minutes and let some people get in, and then we'll go ahead and start. I know some people have already looked up some information on women that I think will be very helpful. And I noticed I was thinking I'll do biblical stuff as well because nobody's doing biblical stuff, but I found a couple others I wanted to do.
Good.
I think Stuart, was Stuart a biblical?
Yeah, Bruria.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was post-biblical, but she's
Okay.
she's basically brand new. We're talking like 5th, 6th century CE. So it's
Oh,
like
wow.
Judaism.
Okay, youngster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might as well be last week.
Stuart won't be joining us this morning. He has a doctor's appointment, so.
Well, we hope everything goes smoothly.
He had some surgery, some like Mohs surgery yesterday, so he.
Some
Mohs, they took something right near his eye, so
okay.
what do you call it? Removed a growth? What is that? A tumor? I'm not sure what you call it. What's the word when it's?
A basal cell.
Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. Thank you. Exactly.
You
Go
see,
ahead. Fine, just-
I could have been a doctor. Yes, I wouldn't walk where they wanted me to walk.
Okay.
So
Wow, the ones who didn't know what that
excuse
is.
me 1 second. Larry may not be able to get on. Hi, Larry. How you doing? Hey. Hi, Jane.
Can we all hear her?
I'm going to send it to you right now. I'll send it to you right now. Of course.
It's the same as last week.
Okay, cool.
That's a new link.
You know what I've been doing? I
I
don't
don't know,
know.
it's funny, one week I couldn't get in for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, on
It's-
Wednesday it went down. I mean, Mondays Zoom went down for a bit.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's just so, I think it was because of school. And it's just, imagine hundreds of thousands of, kids or millions of kids. And I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. I know I started doing something. I don't know how, maybe I mentioned this already, but when I get invited to something or have something scheduled via Zoom, I keep my calendar. I use Google Calendar. So rather than a paper calendar, I just copy the link right onto my calendar, and then I'm not scrambling to find
Yeah.
the email that had the link, and
yeah,
it really worked well.
good idea.
I'm
It doesn't
saying-
show on the calendar, but when you open that event, then I can just click right on it and go. So just a thought.
Yeah.
That's a great way to do it.
It's been so easy and, literally not
And I'm
scrambling.
going to call, make sure they got it. So,
Rabbi, are you sending the list of names that you mentioned last time?
I am not, or did I already? Because I seem
it.
to have lost it. There we go. I can, you mean the name of women?
Yes, women that you.
Yeah, I cannot find it. I don't know. I think I missed filed it. Let me see if I can find it here. Wait. I was looking at that again.
Good morning, Larry.
Good morning, Larry.
Hi.
I don't know this.
Rabbi.
I'll have to redo it.
I save all of Jennifer's emails, and apparently she hasn't been including the link because I keep going back to the link. And
Oh,
No, it's right there.
Yeah, we
Monday
got
she
it.
sent it.
He
Oh.
sent it on the 24th.
Yeah, it starts out, do you want to see Rabbi Alper? And then it had all the stuff underneath.
Well, no, that's not true because we have a separate one that's sent to Larry
Oh,
that doesn't
Oh,
include links.
oh, without the link, without the link.
Yeah.
Oh,
I get the link with the capital L.
one without the link for Larry.
It's the same link as last week, right?
Yeah, it should be the same
It
link
is,
for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A recurring meeting.
Let me see.
But Larry's resourceful. He'll
Well, I
find
put it
it.
on.
I called Michael, but apparently he doesn't answer his phone.
You're blocked.
Michael's phone. So I had to call the rabbi. I had to go right to the source.
Right to the- You know, I say I have all this stuff on Jewish women for this class, and it is gone from my computer. I don't know where it is. Maybe I'll have to find it. I apologize.
Can't find it. It's here. I hear it ringing. I heard it ringing before.
Good thing I have what I was going to talk about separately.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead and start. We are on YouTube. Again, welcome everyone to Mikveh Israel, to our study session. As today, we're going to talk about Jewish women in history, part 2. Last week, we had an incredible number of them, and I'm going to have to go back on and review it because I have lost the record of what we did. So I apologize for that. But I know we'll do different ones this week. I know a lot of people have some already. In fact, I think 1 or 2 people aren't on yet. So we're going to go ahead and get started and then see what people have, which women have really come up as women they'd like to talk about. We know the list is, long beyond belief, but each of us finds what really connects with us. So does anybody want to start?
I will, to get it over with.
Okay, well, I think we'll
Oh,
have
Rena.
Rena and Karen. I think you were first anyway from last. It was
Right,
Flossie
right.
and Rena. So we'll do Flossie. I apologize, Karen. I promised last week.
Oh, that's fine. Rena's fine.
Flossie. I'll do Rena, Flossie, and then Karen,
It's fine.
Okay. And me.
and then Harriet.
Okay, so just to let you all know, this may be a little long, but maybe not. I don't know. I found her very interesting, and she's someone different from the women that you spoke about last week. I don't know if any women will recognize her name when I say it. Her name is Beatrice Alexander. And Beatrice Alexander was born into a world where many women work, but few achieve prominence in business. She built her company single-handedly, raised amidst poverty. She amassed a significant fortune. From the obscurity of immigrant neighborhood, she became a foremost female entrepreneur of the 20th century. Although Alexander's success took her far from the Lower East Side immigrant world of her childhood, she never lost sight of those less fortunate from her. I'm going to let you know who she is in a minute. She donated substantial sums to both Jewish and non-Jewish organizations in Israel and the United States, and she was a committed Zionist throughout her life. The woman who would become known as Madame Alexander was born in Brooklyn on March 9th, 1895. She was named Bertha, but later adopted the more sophisticated Beatrice. Alexander's mother, Hannah Pepper, was born in Austria, but arrived in the United States from Russia. She had escaped vicious pogroms, where she had, I said that already, I'm sorry. Shortly thereafter, she met and married Maurice Alexander, who had left his native Odessa as a young man and spent several years as an apprentice in Germany before coming to America. Beatrice and her sister Rose and Florence and Jean grew up on Grand Street on the Lower East Side in the heart of New York's teeming immigrant community. Poverty was often extreme in the neighborhood, where a myriad of different languages and different cultures existed side by side. Like most of the neighbors, Hannah and Maurice had come to the United States filled with expectations, and they had even had higher hopes for their children's future as they did for their own. The Alexander girls were encouraged to work hard, do well in high school. Alexander's association with dolls began the year she was born, when her stepfather opened the United States' first doll hospital. Before the invention of plastic, most dolls were made of china and were highly breakable. By restoring shattered dolls to health, Maurice earned the gratitude of countless children. I remember her father coming in the middle of the night because his little girl was sick and had broken her doll, and she needed it right away. A difficult task when the poor doll's head was shattered into a dozen pieces, Beatrice said in 1983. The contrast between the wealth of many of Maurice's customers and the poverty of the neighborhood made a deep impression on the young Beatrice. And like many other children of immigrants, she became highly motivated to achieve a better future. When I was 11 or 12, she remembered, I realized that there were poor people and there were rich people, and I leaned towards the rich. I wanted to have a carriage and a hat with ostrich feathers. Hannah assumed her daughter would achieve these goals by marrying well, and joked that it would take three husbands to support Beatrice in the manner in which she desired. On June 30th, 1912, a few weeks after serving valedictorian for high school, Alexander married Philip Berman. While Philip worked in the personnel department of Hat Factory, Beatrice took 6 months commercial course and worked as a bookkeeper for the Irving hat stores in 1950. She had then given birth to a daughter, Mildred, she would later refer to as the happiest moment of her life. World War I, which broke out 2 years after Beatrice and Philip's wedding, changed Beatrice's future dramatically. While untouched by the immense physical destruction of the Great War, the United States was not immune to the massive economic disruption of the war. Many of the dolls that filled Maurice Alexander's shop and hospital came from Germany, and Hannah and Maurice's livelihood was soon threatened by Allied embargoes of German goods. Beatrice and her sister, determined not to allow their parents' business to fail, quickly decided to produce homemade dolls for sale. Beatrice, recalling the despair of the young customers of the doll hospital, and in any case, if deprived of more exotic materials, proposed that they make a cloth doll. Inspired by the women involved in the war effort, she chose a Red Cross nurse for her model. Under Beatrice's exacting but effective directions, the Alexander sisters gathered around their parents' kitchen tables to sew dolls, which they flew off the shelves of Maurice's store and the family business. In the immediate follow of World War I, the Alexander sisters continued to produce dolls for their parents. They supplied the European doll industry battered by years of war. Beatrice discovered that she enjoyed the work. It fulfilled her artistic inclinations, and she was an efficient manager. She also needed distraction after the loss of a second baby in the Spanish flu epidemic. In 1923, she decided to formalize her doll making operations with 1,600 loans. She created the Alexander Doll Company. Alexander had to fight to be taken seriously as a businesswoman, for bankers often saw women as poor credit risks and retailers tried to take advantage of them. But she skillfully manipulated people's assumptions for her own benefit. Firm when necessary, she flirted when she could help her cause. She also brought her daughter along to meetings to heighten loan officers' sympathies for a struggling young mother. When a sympathetic banker granted her a much-needed loan, but clearly did not expect her to repay it, Alexander vowed to repay the entire sum. I wanted to teach him a lesson, she said. You need to believe in people's dreams, especially women. In the mid-1920s, realizing she needed someone she trusted to help her manage her firm, Alexander asked her husband to quit his job. Philip was nervous about making the family's entire financial future dependent upon an unproven business, but Beatrice threatened to divorce him if he refused. I meant it, she later asserted. It seemed to me I could always get another man. Philip finally agreed and worked alongside his wife until his death in 1966. Alexander had a keen instinct for what would increase the sale of her dolls in 1933. She pioneered the practice of movie tie-ins, reissuing Alice in Wonderland and Little Women dolls to coincide with the film's version of the books. Her greatest movie coup occurred in 1936 when she created a Scarlett O'Hara doll that looked just like Vivian Leigh, 2 years before Leigh auditioned for Gone with the Wind. Alexander also kept a sharp eye in public events for potential models. When the first surviving quintuplets were born in Ontario, Canada in 1934, she knew immediately that Dion quintuplets would be wildly popular, and the Alexander Doll Company quickly secured the license to produce them. The company followed the children as they grew, and these dolls that truly brought Alexander dolls into the forefront. Alexander excelled at the design of her dolls. I didn't want to just make ordinary dolls with unmeaning, empty smiles. Their painted lips and a squeaky way of saying mama after you pinch, she said. I wanted dolls to have souls. You have no idea how I labored over noses and mouths so they would really look real and individual. To ensure that the dolls' costumes were scrupulously accurate, she returned time and again to the New York Public Library in search of authentic representations of other times, places, and culture. Standing at the forefront of doll making, Alexander experimented constantly to make her dolls more attractive, more lifelike, and more marketable. Dissatisfied with the stiff, flat faces of her cloth dolls, she developed techniques to sculpt in fabric, achieving lively, realistic facial features. Sleep eyes, rooted hair, walking dolls were among the novelty that emerged from her factory. Having moved from cloth to a new composition material in the 1920s, immediately after World War II, she was among the first toy makers to use the new material of plastic, which finally allowed her to fulfill her dream of creating an unbreakable doll. By the 1950s, Alexander's reputation earned her a challenging commission. The department store of Abraham and Straus asked her to produce dolls representing the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. After lengthy research and consultation with the British Museum of Costume, Alexander created 36 dolls that included the Queen, maids of honor, archbishops, choir boys, royal relatives, and honor guards. The resulting set, valued in 1953 at $25,000, was so accurate that the CBS used it to create the coronation on television. Thousands flocked to see it. All right, we're getting to the end here. Okay. Alexander believed strongly that the more simple playthings, dolls were tools that could stimulate children's minds, emotions, and imaginations. Dolls, she said, should contribute to a child's understanding of people, other times and other places. Dolls should develop an appreciation of art and literature in a child. They could also help children learn how to relate to others. Okay, now this is also interesting about her. Despite her progressive views, Alexander's relationship to feminism was complex. As a strong, outspoken, self-sufficient woman, she clearly did not conform to traditional ideas about women's role and characteristics. She encouraged her female employees to be self-reliant, and in the early years even brought them to Margaret Sanger's clinic for checkups and birth control. According to her secretary, Madame Alexander was the original feminist. She was doing a man's job when the world was not always accepting or approving of an independent woman. Yet with many of her creations, she apparently encourages girls to be more concerned in appearance and etiquette, than self-fulfillment. Alexander was forced to respond to the 1970s and 1980s to charges from the growing feminist movement that the doll industry was retrograde and harmful to women. Denying vigorously that her dolls contributed to the oppression of women, she argued and said that they helped to build up a girl's capacity to love others and herself. The role of dolls and toys more generally in building children's sense of appropriate gender roles remains hotly debated. By 1936, her business was referred by all the gallants of business as the Queen of Dolls. The highly quality Alexander's dolls were dubbed the Cadillac of dolldom. Customers stood in line for hours to buy new creations, and retailers sometimes had to limit the number of dolls a shopper could purchase. People were desperate to go home with more than one doll, says an associate of Alexander's of an episode in the department store. They would lie, beg, or even try to steal to get more one Scarlet. It was truly amazing. Alexander's achievements were recognized by her colleagues as well as her customers. In 1951, she won the first of 4 consecutive Fashion Academy Gold medals for the ultimate design and beauty, for encouraging great taste and clothes and appreciation, and symbolizing best dressed so perfectly in 1986. Okay. In 1982, Alexander recalled that the Women's League for Palestine, now called the Women's League for Israel, had been a crucial factor to her entry into the business world. In 1920, she became involved with a group of women who were concerned about the fate of female immigrants to Palestine. She founded the League to help provide the immigrants homes and jobs. For several months, Alexander took money for the household budget to contribute to the League, but eventually her husband confronted her about the unpaid bills. I sat in the easy chair all night, Alexander remembered. I said, I'm not going to stop doing this. I'm going to bed. I would have been asleep for Israel. What can I do where I can be left with $50 a week? That's all I spoke about. I must do something to earn money. I had no trade, I had no profession. All I knew was that I needed a few extra dollars to help those girls in Israel. She decided to start her own doll business to earn money to donate to the League, which I'm going back a little, but important. Okay. Okay. I might be missing a page. Bear with me. Thought I had this all together. We're coming to the end. Okay. Okay. In 1988, at the age of 93, Alexander officially retired and sold the doll company to private investors. She remained nominally as a design consultant, but in actuality, the company had passed from her hand. She died on October 3rd, 1990 in Palm Beach. I just wanted to tell you, she was a huge philanthropist for Jewish causes, which I was trying to find, was somehow slipped out of here, for Israel, for many, many Jewish causes. I thought she was very interesting and something different, you know, with Jewish women. I don't know how many of you recall the Alexander dolls. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Thank you, Rena. And I'm sure many of you had them. My mom had over 1,000 dolls and stuffed animals, including mini Madame Alexander, most of which were sold accidentally in the estate sale. As I tell people, that's why I'm not looking forward to heaven, because she is not going to be happy. But I still have a couple. In fact, my wife the other day took the Alexanders and was about to give them to my daughter and to play with. And she said, well, your mom, who passed away many years ago before she met her, would want her granddaughters to play with the dolls. And to which I started laughing, because she would not want anybody to touch her dolls.
Right, she might pull the head off or do
Yeah.
something, right?
So I know many of them. She, of course, is an incredible entrepreneur from the 20th century. So thank you so much, Rena. Really interesting lady. And I know many of us still have a few of the dolls somewhere in the house to remember our youth, our parents, or so forth. So that was awesome. All right, we'll go to, that was great. We'll go to I think Flossie, and then Karen and Harriet. And it's amazing that Alexander was such a strong woman. Oh, I know who she is.
Yes.
Golda Meir. Golda Meir, the world's most famous grandmother. She was born in Kiev in 1898. She died in 1978.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff said the end. No, a little more, a little more. Israeli political leader, first Israeli ambassador to the Soviet Union, and I'll be touching that later on. She was a symbol to the Jewish people of a quest for survival. She was the most prominent woman politician of her era. Her secret, they say, was a rare mixture of sincerity and courage. She reached people simply by her candor of words. She was born Mabelvitz. She married Meyerson, and she Hebraicked her name to Meir, or Meyer, M-E-I-R. The interesting thing that I found in reading about her was they kept bringing up, she was poorly educated. She nevertheless mesmerized audiences with her speeches, most of them unscripted. The ultimate insider. She had been labor minister as well as foreign minister before becoming prime minister. She was also an outsider, a woman reaching for the highest leadership roles in a male-dominated society. She led Israel in times of peace and in war. She had nerves of steel. I had said earlier, bringing up about her being Israeli ambassador to the Soviet Union. In 1948, when she arrived in the Soviet Union, she arrived on Rosh Hashanah. She went to Moscow's only synagogue, which ignited a spontaneous pro-Israeli demonstration. Over 40,000 Russian Jews went to support her. Ben-Gurion called her, I quote, the only man in my cabinet.
The best man.
Jeff said the best man. She stated that the saddest task she had as foreign minister was to stand before the United Nations in 1957 and announce that Israel would comply with the demand to withdraw its troops from the Sinai Peninsula after the Jewish state's triumphant Sinai campaign. She was fighting cancer for many years, but she kept it quiet. No one knew. She came back into the government when Prime Minister Levi Eshkol died suddenly in 1969, and the party chose Golda Meir to replace him. National elections were held and she won. Now this I found very interesting. 4 years later, when Egypt and the Syrian armies, excuse me, surprised Israel by launching the Yom Kippur War, many of her countrymen held Golda responsible for her country's lack of preparedness. Though she successfully led her country in counterattacking, nothing would erase the fact that 2,500 Israeli soldiers died and another 3,000 were wounded. Blamed for the country for the army's failure to be prepared for the war, she was forced to step down as prime minister in April 1974 under mounting public pressure. Though taunted by the surprise attack of the Yom Kippur War, Golda remained a powerful symbol of the Jewish people. She died 4 years later at age 80 in 1978. Upon her death, Walter Cronkite went and said, I quote, "She lived a life under pressure that we in this country would find impossible to understand. She is the strongest woman to head a government in our time and for a very long time past." that they kept stressing how we see her in our country is very different how a lot of the Israelis see her because of what happened with the war. I still love her. And to me, she was a very special lady.
And that Walter Cronkite quote is very interesting because she was, as of her death, she was only the second woman to ever lead a nation. And so it was, I think Margaret Thatcher was third. Jeff.
Yes, the term Iron Lady that was later used for Margaret Thatcher was first used for Golda Meir. She really ruled very strongly. She was a strong PM, but well, that's why Ben-Gurion called her the strongest man in his cabinet was Golda. And she had dual citizenship. She did have when Flossie said she wasn't well educated, she graduated from Teachers College. She was a very sharp student. She was valedictorian. That Teachers College later became part of University of Wisconsin, but its old name is long forgotten. But she was a dual citizen, United States and Israel. She was a kibbutznik. Her talent came out very early. She became part of the Historut movement. Her political beliefs were towards socialism. Similar to Ben-Gurion, she looked at the Jewish people culturally. Religiously, she was an atheist, but very, very strong culturally with Judaism. She had quite the political career rising through the ranks. One of the interesting things was when they founded Israel, they were desperately short of money and funds before the independence was declared. She came to the United States on a fundraising mission, and the goal was $7 to $8 million to raise for desperately needed money to buy arms in Europe. She came back from that campaign with $50 million, 50, far exceeding anything. That was used to buy a lot of the arms that Israel used for survival. Just a few fill-ins from Flossie and I both had picked the same woman,
Without
so
realizing.
we had, so I just wanted to supplement her a little bit.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
By the way, despite the war, her reputation was largely reclaimed. She led him through an extremely difficult war that ended it in a miraculous victory, really turned around in a period of 3 weeks. It turned from pending defeat to victory. Also, the other person involved in the war that took a big hit was
Moshe Dayan.
Yeah, Moshe Dayan, of course. But he also was reconstructed, later on.
It's interesting. We had two women, both from the 20th century, who lived, pretty much at the same time. Although, of course, Alexandra lived a little bit longer. And one was, a businesswoman. The other was became Israeli prime minister, politician. So shows you the diversity there. So let's go. Great job. Let's go to Karen. And then we'll go to Harry.
Quick question.
Oh, Larry, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking it would be interesting to maybe track Israeli politics. Did she inspire a women's movement? I'm not really sure. You don't hear too much about women in Israeli politics, or I don't. I'm not that keen, not tuned in. But like the distribution of women in the Knesset and which parties are they in and things of that nature. I was just, if maybe we could do a little session on that one time and see, did she make an impact, so to speak? Was there a, like we're seeing a big women's movement today, obviously, in the United States, and with Kamala being nominated and, of course, Hillary last time. But, it just seems like Israel, we haven't heard much about the women. And how does the Orthodox Party, view having a woman as leaders? Just another side thought.
That could be a
Something
very
to
interesting
discuss.
discussion. But really since her, I don't think there's anybody who has been close to winning who has been a woman. And of course,
Sippy.
Sippy, she was asked to form the government. She won the popular vote. She was the first one to form the government, but could not form the government, couldn't put that needed coalition together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
she's
don't
the
think she was-
last one.
yeah, I don't know how close, but she certainly is the most obvious politician in Israel today who's a woman. But again, as in America, we're still, I think she was certainly an example, but I'm not sure if women flowed into politics in the 70s after her. I think a lot of it actually has been more in the more recent days, but it's hard to tell. But still, Israel has a female leader and America has never had one. We
Right.
haven't had one run
Way ahead of us.
or win the nomination yet, so. All right, so thank you. That was terrific. All right, 2 for 2. Let's go to Karen. Who did you choose?
Okay, I don't know how many, just curious, have heard of Penina Moise.
I'm sorry, what's the name, Karen?
Penina Moise. Anybody? Rabbi, have you? Wait, have you heard of her? I can't hear you. You're on mute, Rabbi. All right, I can't hear what you.
Yes, I have heard of her.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
She's
So-
a poet.
Yeah, she's,
author.
yeah, I'm sorry. She's a little closer to home. Before I tell you about her, about
And
10
from this
years,
area too, so it's kind of cool.
she's what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
She's from this general area.
Exactly. So about 10 years ago, I was doing some writing for our Sun City magazine, the Sensations. And I was asked to write an article about Hanukkah in South Carolina. And I'm thinking, well, what could possibly be unique about Hanukkah in South Carolina? So somebody, maybe Rabbi Bloom, anyway, somebody put me in touch with the Jewish Historical Society, or the Southern Jewish Historical Society. They're located at the College of Charleston, I guess. Anyway, they told me about it. They said, oh, that's great that you asked, because we're going to tell you about Penina Moise. So she was credited, among many other things, with having sort of brought Hanukkah sort of to the forefront as a Jewish celebration, because up until then, Hanukkah, certainly in America, was a very minor holiday. I mean, technically it still is, but in response to Jewish kids and Christmas, she really wrote music about Hanukkah. Anyway, but let me tell you about her life. She was born in 1797. And when she was born in 1797, American Jewish women and women in general had only limited cultural and career opportunities. Moise would spend her adult life, overcoming cultural and physical limitations. She left her mark as America's first female Jewish poet and hymnist. In fact, her hymns, written mostly in the 1830s and 1840s, are still sung in Reform congregations today. She was the 6th of 9 children born to Abraham and Sarah Moise. The Moises moved to Charleston from the Caribbean 5 years before she was born, before Penina was born. And their French Jewish background strongly influenced her. I think they were originally from Alsace, France, her parents. She would later impress her students with the gaiety, contentment, and joyous philosophy of her French temperament. That's a quote. When she was 12, her father died, leaving her mother impoverished. Penina's formal education ended, but she continued to read on her own. Legend has it that she sometimes stayed up late reading by moonlight. Some man named Isaac Harvey, a dramatist, teacher, and editor, and bright star in Jewish Charleston's intellectual firmament, became her intellectual mentor. He nurtured her Judaism. She began writing Jewish hymns, poems, and odes in English until her death in 1880. When her synagogue, KKBE, or KK Beth Elohim, burned in a fire in 1838, the Charleston Jewish community rebuilt it. When the new building opened in 1841, the choir sang an original ode that Moise had composed for the event. Her hymns were collected together in a hymnal, the first Jewish such work published in English on American soil. That was in the 1840s. Her first published poem appeared in the Charleston newspaper in 1819. And for the next 6 decades, her prodigious output of stories, poems, and essays appeared in national magazines such as Godey's Lady's Book and in local newspapers from New Orleans to New York. She was a, in the 1840s, she became the head teacher in KKBE's Sunday school. Unfortunately, she never earned a satisfactory living from her writing or teaching. She nursed her mother until the latter died in 1842. She was the only sibling not to marry, out of, I guess, 9 kids, I think it was. Let's see. Okay. Mosse first won national artistic acclaim in 1833 when she published Fancy's Sketchbook, a collection of her poems. The work was unusual in several respects. It was the first published book of verse by an American Jewish woman, and it appeared under her own name when conventionally most women authors used pseudonyms. It broke female boundaries by addressing serious political themes such as Southern secession and states' rights, Greek oppression by the Turks, and Irish home rule. Most importantly, Mosse's poems advocated for Jewish rights around the world. She prefigured the writings of Emma Lazarus in a poem called, to persecuted foreigners, in which she proposed that Europe's oppressed Jews come to the homes and bosoms of the free, to, quote, plenty's flowering bed, unquote, where, quote, a Western sun would gild their future day. In 1833, when the English House of Lords denied full extension of rights to Jews in the British Isles, the outraged Mosse composed, quote, the rejection of the Jew bill by the House of Lords, in which she characterized the Lords' action as an aristocratic inquisition. She also protested the killing of Jews in Damascus, Syria in 1840, and the kidnapping by Catholic priests in 1858 of Edgar Mortara, an Italian Jewish boy. Mosse was also an early Zionist. Her poetry looked forward to a day when captive Judah would again be ingathered in the Holy Land. Let's see. So she apparently moved to Sumter during the Civil War years, but then returned to Charleston, opened a private school where she taught all the literature she had memorized. Oh, she became blind. I'm sorry, I left that out. But she went back and taught in Charleston from memory all the literature she had memorized while sighted. Her last will and testament dictated that in keeping with her modesty, she'd be buried in a plain pine box in Charleston's Jewish cemetery and that no flowers be strewn over her grave. Her hymns are still in print, but her poems are rarely read nowadays. I forget when this was written. Last year, she was posthumously inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors. Perhaps her time in the sun still lies ahead. Anyway, just a little local person that I had never heard of and discovered while learning about Hanukkah in South Carolina. So
I think as we've seen, some are more popular or more well-known, some less so, some are well-known even if we don't know their names, as with Madame Alexander. So she's really interesting, and also from the Charleston area, which is really nice. We know she most likely had ties with Savannah and with in Sun City area.
Yeah.
Bossy.
Karen, how do you spell her name?
Oh, P-E-N-I-N-A.
Oh, Penina. Okay.
M-O-I-S-E. I think sometimes it's, yeah, M-O-I-S-E, Moise.
Thank you.
Moise, probably Moise or something in French.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. That was terrific. So another excellent one. This one living, of course, a little bit 200 years or so before the other two. So let's go to Harriet, who sent me a notice to who she's going to teach us about.
Okay. The person I've chosen had a very short life, but it was quite amazing. Her name was Hannah Senesh. She was born in Hungary in July of 1921. Her father died when she was fairly young, but her mother felt that education was very important. And even though her mother didn't have unlimited funds, she sent her to a private school, and it happened to be a Protestant school. And the reason why was because there were not very many other really good schools, and her mother recognized the fact that she was very gifted. So she went to this Protestant school that also accepted Catholics and Jews. But of course, the tuition for someone that wasn't Protestant was 2 or 3 times the tuition of the others. And when her mother couldn't afford to pay 3 times the tuition and was going to have to remove her, the school said, well, she's a very gifted child, so therefore I'll only charge you 2 times the amount. Well, anyway, she started writing a diary when she was 12. And she also, from the time that she was old enough to write, she loved to write poems. And when she got a little bit older, she started to write plays. When she graduated from high school in 1939, she actually, while she was in high school, she became very involved with the Maccabees, which was the Hungarian Zionist women. And so when she graduated from high school, she decided to emigrate to Palestine, which was then occupied by the British. And she was going to attend a college for agriculture. And when she got there, she became involved with a group that I'm just taking a look. She became involved with Kibbutz Sdot Yam, and then the Haganah, which was the paramilitary group that laid the foundation for the Israeli Defense Forces. She was sent to Egypt to become a paratrooper. And on March 14th, 1944, she parachuted into Yugoslavia with 2 other Israelis. And their goal was to get into Hungary and warn. They had names that they hooked up with partisans in the area, and they were given names of people who were going to be sent to Auschwitz. And so they were trying to warn these people and get them out of there before they were sent. Well, the partisans decided that it was too dangerous for the mission to continue. So several people decided that they were not going to continue with this, but she, along with a couple of others, decided that they were still going to try to finish this mission. So when they got to the Hungarian border, they were arrested. On her person was a British transmitter, and they wanted the code for this transmitter. And she refused to give it. She only said her name and rank. And they stripped her, they tied her to a chair, they whipped her, they clubbed her for 3 days. She still would not give up her name. They arrested her mother, who had also immigrated with her, and they threatened to kill her mother, and she would still not give the code. The mother was eventually released. There was a trial, and she was found guilty of treason, and she was executed by firing squad. She was only 23 years old at that time. Now, the interesting thing is that her diary, she kept her diary in her prison cell, and she continued to make entries until she was actually executed. She was brought back to Israel, and her body was brought back to Israel, and she was buried in Mount Herzl Cemetery in Jerusalem. She's regarded as a national heroine in Israel. Her poetry is well known. Some of her plays have been produced. Several streets, a kibbutz, and the Zionist Youth Movement headquarters are all named after her. She is also in Yad Vashem. One of her poems, most of us know. We sing it. And it's called Eli, Eli, or My Lord, My Lord. And I'll play it for you. If I can find it. I'll play it for you. Okay, here we go. It's in Hebrew. Okay. Okay, how many people recognize the tune? Okay, it's translated as my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, starting to sound familiar. The rustle of the waters, lightning of the heavens, the prayer of man. And I thought that she was very interesting because in her short life, she made, quite an impact on the Israeli people and on and her her poetry, of course, is still used today.
Harriet, I was going to say, when you go to Mount Herzl, to the cemetery to visit her grave, many of the graves there are in like these huge plots. So hers has the 3 parachutists, and there's a parachute at the top, and then the strings come down, and her grave is in the front, as though she's the grave is. It's very, very moving.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so if you haven't visited the graves on Mount Herzl, I mean,
I went to Mount Herzl, but I didn't.
If you walk around to visit the different graves, there's so many that are symbolic like that.
Right. Well, we were on a mission with the Federation, and they didn't give us very much time other than, you rush to this place, you rush to that place. So we didn't really have time to walk around.
Well, she is definitely one of Israel's greatest heroes, maybe more respected and appreciated than almost anyone, because she's so universally loved for exactly what Harriet mentioned. And so Eli, Eli became the song that's sung after Havdalah. So you sing Havdalah and then you do Eli, Eli. So it's known by other people singing other places. I've heard some much more upbeat tunes as well. So it's really quite amazing. So thank you for sharing her. I think many of us have heard of her. We may not know as much about her, but we heard. Larry.
Yeah, I was going to say, each year the New Jersey Playwrights Festival holds a readings for different plays at Keene College, which is in New Jersey, or Keene University now. And several years ago, they had, and they're all original plays by prominent authors, generally in the New York, New Jersey area. And they did a play about, it must be at least 5 or 10 years ago that Jane and I saw there, which was on her life and the ordeal that she went through. I'm going to check it on YouTube, just in the eventuality. It was a short play, and it was one of the award-winning plays that was selected for them to put on a full production. It never made it to Broadway or anything like that, but it was quite compelling at the time, and it had a lot of her original writings in it from her memoirs. I'll check to see if it's available, to see if we could do that. And along the same line, you know, the Golder, you know, The View from the Balcony, or I forget exactly what it was called, which was a Broadway show. There is a movie of that, which really would be worth seeing. You know, the balcony view, the long view, so to speak, you know, where you're up in the balcony and you can see everything that's going on, and you're kind of like one of the crowd. So there's a couple of really interesting films and plays out there.
Yeah, and I do have to say that even though the song that I played for you was beautifully sung, I think that Kelly does a better job.
There was a movie I remember called Summer Blues, in which they have kind of a more rock and roll version of Ellie A. Lee, which is really stunningly beautiful as well. So it does work that way. But again, universally loved, probably, again, if you're not, it's easier sometimes to be universally loved if you're not a politician. And so that tends to be divided. So she is universally loved because obviously she was not a politician, but is one of Israel's great heroes, along with Yoni Netanyahu, of course, who is Benjamin Netanyahu's brother who died, and along with what's his name? I just forgot. Yael Aron, the Israeli astronaut who died in the.
Yeah.
He is also, those are kind of like three that everybody love and admire. And they all died young. And does anybody else have one they want to share? I have one then. I'll be happy to share one before we finish. Some of you have heard of her, some of you have not. But of course, Hedy Lamarr is a very famous actress that many people, I think now she's become more known as being Jewish, seminally or truly. She certainly described herself as Jewish, but again, an incredible woman, as we know. And her life, of course, begins in Europe and is really very lucky to have gotten out as so many others. She's from Vienna. She's from what was the Austro-Hungarian Empire still at this time, I believe. And she was born in an upper class. I mean, her family was wealthy. So her dad was a bank manager. Her mother was also from a wealthy family. And she actually, many people don't realize, she converted to Catholicism as an adult for a short time because of her husband, although she really always stayed Jewish and was only married to him for like a year. So she was born with a very different name. As we know, her last name was Kessler or Keisler, Eva Marie Keisler or Kessler. And she had a wonderful childhood, and by 16, she was already starting her work in the arts, as she was a script girl. And then by 1930 already, and she's only 16, she's already becoming a actress for plays and then movies. And she ended up doing some theater, and then did some movies with a very prominent director and producer, Max Reinhardt. And then, before many of us ever heard of her, she became very famous. At 18 in 1933, she had the lead in a movie called Ecstasy, which made her famous and notorious at the exact same time, even though she was only 18. The movie is famous because it showed a little bit of nudity, and it showed her having, showed her in sex, enjoying sex, basically, or the true way you have sex. And so she was infamous and famous. So her movie was banned in places like America. in places like Germany, although that was also because of her being Jewish. And she ended up marrying one of Europe's wealthiest men who was completely absorbed with her, Fritz Mandl. And so she was married to him and converted to Catholicism for his mother. And even though he was Jewish and partly Jewish, he was a fascist. And he had ties to Mussolini. He had ties to the Nazis in Germany, even Adolf Hitler. Even though he had some Jewish blood, eventually he got into a frit with, I think, Hermann Goering, ended up having to move to Switzerland and still stayed wealthy, ended up moving to to Argentina and stayed very wealthy there. But he was, and eventually went back to Europe for a while. So as she married him, she was only 18, and he was very controlling. So she basically just ran away and divorced him from afar, and ended up on a boat to America. And on this boat was also Louis B. Mayer, because she had met him while he was looking for talent in Europe, and they ended up on the same boat to America. He kept offering her money, and eventually she decided to work for him, and she got a contract. So immediately upon coming to America, she was portrayed as the most beautiful woman in the world. And that's how Louis B. Mayer wanted her portrayed, as this seductress, not only because of her, the movie she had done that made her famous, but just because of her personality. So right away, which is unusual, in 1938, she became a B+ star, eventually an A star, and she's only 1920. So she ends up in movies all the way starting in 1938, usually playing the same type of character. Louis B. Mayer wanted another Garble or Dietrich, and she was pretty close. She wasn't quite to the level, but she ended up being leading lady to Spencer Tracy several times, Clark Gable in movies with Claudette Colbert, James Stewart. And then as her career got going on, she got kind of tired of being restricted to these roles. So she actually started her own movie company and produced 2, what do they call movies? The what do we call that word? The
Film noir.
Film noir, thank you. Film noir movies. They didn't turn very successful. Her career was kind of dying down, but she went back, and then she had her biggest hit actually in a movie all of us, I am probably sure, have seen. And of course, that is the movie where she played Delilah in Samson and Delilah, which ended up being her biggest seller. Again, her career had gone down a little bit. And then, of course, she had this big movie, and she had a few more movies, obviously, before, as she got older, her career started to run down a little bit. But again, she is remembered for Samson Delilah because she is this Delilah character, and that's what she often portrayed, this sensual siren foreign woman. And so she would continue doing movies into the 50s until she kind of went away from the spotlight for a bit. But she's also known because she was very bright. And many of you know she has a very important patent to her name. She also dated Howard Hughes and actually helped a little bit with some of his designs for planes and boats. So in World War II, she realized or learned that radio-controlled torpedoes could be jammed. And she figured out a way to stop the jamming process. In other words, make sure the torpedo wasn't jammed. It had to do with some frequencies working with piano. I don't understand the technology behind it, but some of you may. It was called frequency hopping system. It was not used in World War II, in no small part because she was not in the military and because she was a woman. But later in the 50s, it was started to be used, and the technology is used today in things such as Bluetooth. So again, she became a citizen of America in her later years. She did a few things here and there, but really stayed more in the backdrop. She was a painter, along with being a scientist. and really was an interesting woman by all accounts. And then the last decade or so, she became, kind of a, she kind of stayed at home and became one of these famous Hollywood secluded women. But again, I think many of us heard of her. She, of course, is very famously mentioned in Blazing Saddles. That's the first time I heard of her. And she was not happy about it. And she actually, I think, sued Mel Brooks for the use of her name for that movie. So that was really interesting. But she had a very great career for about 15, 20 years. And again, was married several times meaning six times over a 30-year period. And the last one she divorced in 1965 and was never married again for the last 35 years of her life. But again, she did things like design a ski resort with one of her husbands. And then she also was arrested for shoplifting. So little things here and there. Obviously, she didn't need the money. The lawsuit was settled with Brooks for almost using her name. So we don't know how much she got from the studio, but it probably wasn't the 10 million. She actually, towards the end of her life, went blind. That was one of the other reasons she kind of became a recluse. She also was a very good businesswoman, by the way, also. So she had acquired rights to some of her patents. Yes, Ron.
I believe that she also had a PhD in the sciences.
Could be.
And she was finally credited during the Second World War for her many inventions. One, by the way, that is being used in that torpedo even today. And especially in a lot of communications. I believe she was also involved in the Morse code and just a whole lot of inventions that she never got credit for. And again, a lot of them are being used even today as far as the internet goes. She really didn't get the credit for that.
Right. I mean, she invented a pyrotechnic device. She did a couple other things. She also did things with husbands, and sometimes the husbands got credit and ended up with but also some believe she's anybody here, I don't know if any of you are big Marvel fans, like big movies, but in the Captain America movie, there's a woman called Peggy Carter, who's Agent Carter. And she later gets her TV show. She's credited with being the one woman to start this secret government organization that becomes a superhero one. And she's the one who falls in love with Captain America. And that woman is modeled after Hedy Lamarr. It's actually a British actress who in real life is actually Jewish, funny enough. So Jane.
There's a book that's really good, The Only Woman in the Room.
Oh,
And,
really?
Yes, and that's all about her husband loved her. Well, I don't know if he loved her, but married her for her beauty, never thinking that she really understood all the plans of the fascists. And she did have patents, and it was really, God bless you. And it was really a good book if anybody is interested in just reading it. It's nonfiction.
What's the name of the book again, Jane? I'm sorry.
The Only Woman in the Room.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jane. We'll try that one.
And there's also a documentary about her as well that's supposed to be very good. And actually, there is supposed to be a TV show. I do not know if it's still on because of all the things. There's supposed to be a TV show about her, starring none other than, maybe a movie or TV show, and starring none other than Gal Gadot, who is supposed to star as her. She, of course, is the Israeli actress who portrays Wonder Woman. I don't know if that's still going to happen or not because of what's going on, but I know that was supposed to happen.
Rabbi, just a side issue here. I remember the movie.
Or you saw her back in
Okay,
5 or 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember in the movie Samson and Delilah, there was a blonde girl that was very attractive, and I think Samson was supposed to marry her, but instead of marrying her, they arranged for him to be married to whoever the Delilah character Hedy Lamarr plays. And I think the line that Samson uses in the movie was, "I was promised a peach and now I'm given a plum," which I always thought was so ironical because she was always being billed as you say, the most beautiful woman. But was there truth in that? I don't know the Samson story that well, if it is biblical or they just made that up to.
I think that is, I don't think that's from the story. So I'll have to check. The story is actually very short. And in the actual biblical story, it's only a couple of pages. But I don't remember the plum part. I'll have to look that up. That's a good question. It could be. Yeah, so the documentary I'm looking on was from 1917, and it is available on Netflix, which I'm now going to go watch because I just realized it was on Netflix. I didn't think it was. So again, very interesting that then she was this blonde, sensual Delilah character, but as you mentioned, very intelligent, and people in the room not always aware. People like Howard Hughes were very aware, and so he was not against using her intelligence and giving her a little bit of credit as well. In the TV show Agent Carter, Howard Hughes is one of the characters. They're kind of sort of dating, but not really, which I think was how their relationship was, kind of sort of dating, but we all know who Howard Hughes was. And so, so very interesting lady, as we mentioned. I was going to do two others, but our time is over, which is very fortuitous because the two women I had planned to do beforehand were Hannah Senesh, which Harriet told me yesterday she was doing, so I knew I'd have to do it, and B. Alexander. So, so Rena did so beautifully. So we all have similar tastes. So I'm sorry, Harriet and Rena, that you have to have similar tastes to me. So hopefully you can overcome that in life. I think Jeff had something to say.
No, it was just a question, Rabbi. I was just curious, having seen, what was the reference in Blazing Saddles? I wasn't quite sure with what that's referring to.
It is, it's a running gag of a woman named Hedy Lamarr. And there's things like that's Hedley, and they have it several times in the movie. So it's obvious it's a reference to her, but they just changed the name a little bit. And I don't know if she was very thrilled with that or not getting any credit or being part of a gag. So who knows exactly? We don't know how much they settled for. It could have been for $1 and an apology, or so. But if you watch the movie, it's mentioned just a couple names.
Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, did you say you have an Alexander doll? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
My mom had a lot of them. I still have a couple of them left.
Could you bring them in to show them to us if you can? Yeah, I would like to see.
I
Go on.
The only dolls I kept intentionally were my mom's F&B dolls because that was the Hollywood. They're not worth anything. It was the Hollywood series with Groucho Marx, Lucille Ball, Mae West, John Wayne.
They're gorgeous.
And then I kept a few Alexander dolls because they were somehow put in a chest that did not accidentally get into the room where all the other ones were accidentally sold for like $1.
Wow.
They weren't worth a lot of money. They're only worth money if they're from boxes in a certain age, but I don't think my mom would have been thrilled that, 200 of them were sold for $1. I'm sure they would. Yes, Flossie.
I just wanted to say what a compliment to us in the group that we picked such a diversified
of
women. I think that was wonderful.
Thumbs up.
We went from very traditional to, wow, I never heard of that before. And
exactly, and we picked some, although today was, most of them were more in the 20th century. We did have one in the 18th century, but before we had going back, and none of them were what we'd call biblical characters. So really the earliest was Bruria, who was way, many years, hundreds of years afterwards. So there's a lot out there. So before we conclude, I do want to double check with anyone, as we usually pick we have a general series listed, but if we want any anything for next week that people want to talk about. I think we had something set like, I forgot, I have it right here. But does anybody else have anything they like? I think we had set next week Jewish authors, which we can do. That's also a very wide range. We could do the same thing because obviously there's you've got everything from meaningful Holocaust, comedy, Nobel Prize winning. So would that be something everybody picks one author, a Jewish author? And we can get a wide range. And then also, if you email me as soon as possible, try and make sure, because this one I think is a little easier to double up because there's certainly a couple who have been very prominent. And so, like Philip Roth and Elie Wiesel and so forth. So we'll do Jewish authors next week. Everybody invited to do one or two. If we go over again, we'll just extend it later because obviously, and you might want to pick we're going to pick the author and concentrate on the author as opposed to the book. That's how it's going to be a little different. Certainly can mention books, but we can do actual books later. Flossie.
Next week, are you interviewing yourself?
I haven't set the interviews for next week. Sorry about that.
No, but.
Oh, yeah, you wanted me? Yeah, for Tuesday. I don't know if that would be kind of ridiculous. So we'll see.
Well, keep it in reserve. You always
Yeah, keep
have
it in
that
reserve when I can't
a
find.
last minute cancellation.
Right, and I'm a little behind because with all the high holiday, we do a lot of stuff going on, and my kids and everybody being sick. We have not got my interviews for next week and the weeks after. So if you have any ideas, let me know. And I will be doing a comedy show online this Sunday for a synagogue in Houston, but they've given me permission to give out the link. So if anybody, and if you want to make a small donation to them, that's great. And it's on my Facebook page.
What time on Sunday, Rabbi?
I think it's 8:30. So I think it's 8:30 our time because it's 7:30 their time.
Okay.
8:30 at night, right? Of
And
course.
not yet.
And
You'll send the link
and
or
you're
you want to
gonna-
give it now?
Just go on my Facebook page, or if you want, I'll be happy to send the link.
Okay.
Harriet, you had a question? And you're still muted. Sorry, Harriet. Still muted.
I'm gonna get ready to go.
We were going to do the Jewish jokes, and I'd love to hear from our, a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, we haven't done that. Do we want to do that instead, where everybody brings their favorite Jewish jokes for next week, or do you want to do Jewish authors? That's a good one.
Jokes.
Jokes? Okay, we'll do Jewish jokes. So everyone bring their favorite Jewish jokes. And Harriet, I want to stress this. They have to be clean, all right? Just putting that out there.
Oh.
So I've got the beeping button right here, Harriet, just let you know, it's coming for you.
Rabbi, with the authors, if we do that the week after, should we send you who we want to do so we don't all? do
Yeah,
it?
just please do that. Yeah, send me
Yeah.
for the
Or we
week
could-
after, and then we'll make sure we won't double up because that would be a shame if people really did research and weren't able to.
Right, yeah, that'd be hard, okay.
All right, good. So, and would you just mention that to everybody else? Again, thank you so much. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
so
And
you.
much.
look forward to seeing you next week.
Very
If
interesting
anything else
today.
you need, let me know.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Guys, stay safe, and thank you again. Bye to everybody out there on YouTube. We will see you later.
Give April our best.
Yes.
Stay safe, guys.
Thank you. That was fun.